Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. And in our ongoing series on Medal of Honor winners, tonight we're going to talk about Colonel Leo Thorsness, who died recently at the age of 85. Colonel then Major Thorsness was an Air Force pilot in Vietnam, and he was nominated for his medal for his actions over North Vietnam in April of 1967. But because he was shot down a little while later and spent 6 years in a North Vietnamese prison camp in Hanoi, the infamous Hanoi Hilton, he did not receive his Medal of Honor until he returned home in 1973. The citation from the Congressional Medal of Honor Society to then Lieutenant Colonel Thorsness reads as follows: Rank Major, Company 357th Tactical Fighter Squadron, date of issue 10/15/1973, place date over North Vietnam, 19 April 1967. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. As pilot of an F-105 aircraft, Lieutenant Colonel Thorsness and his wingmen attacked and silenced the surface-to-air missile site with air-to-ground missiles and then destroyed a second surface-to-air missile site with bombs. In the attack on the second missile site, Lieutenant Colonel Thorsness's wingman was shot down by intensive anti-aircraft fire, and the two crew members abandoned their aircraft. Lieutenant Colonel Thorsness circled the descending parachutes to keep the crew members in sight and relay their position to the search and rescue center. During this maneuver, a MiG-17 was sighted in the area. Lieutenant Colonel Thorsness immediately initiated an attack and destroyed the MiG. Because his aircraft was low on fuel, he was forced to depart the area in search of a tanker. Upon being advised that two helicopters were orbiting over the down cruise position and that there were hostile MiGs in the area posing a serious threat to the helicopters, Lieutenant Colonel Thorsness, despite his low fuel condition, decided to return alone through a hostile environment of surface-to-air missile and anti-aircraft defenses to the down cruise position. As he approached the area, he spotted four MiG-17 aircraft and immediately initiated an attack on the MiGs, damaging one and driving the others away from the rescue scene. When it became apparent that an aircraft in the area was critically low on fuel and the crew would have to abandon the aircraft unless they could reach a tanker, Lieutenant Colonel Thorsness, although critically short on fuel himself, helped to avert further possible loss of life and a friendly aircraft by recovering at a forward operating base, thus allowing the aircraft in emergency fuel condition to refuel safely. Lieutenant Colonel Thorsness's extraordinary heroism, self-sacrifice, and personal bravery involving conspicuous risk of life were in the highest traditions of the military service and have reflected great credit upon himself and the U.S. Air Force. Little background on Colonel Thorsness: he became a pilot right after Korea, but he didn't really see any action until the Vietnam War started. After the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, the war started in earnest in 1965 on the ground and later in the air. By 1966, the United States had stepped up its bombing raids over North Vietnam. North Vietnam countered with surface-to-air missile installations, especially near Hanoi, and pilots were sent from the Soviet Union to train North Vietnamese pilots, and in some cases these Soviet pilots did indeed fly MiGs against American aircraft and shot down American pilots. In 1966, Major Thorsness became part of the Wild Weasels. These were the pilots whose job it was to search and destroy surface-to-air missile installations in North Vietnam. Here, Colonel Thorsness describes what happened to him during the Vietnam War.
I was raised in Minnesota, and a little house in the prairie. There is a Walnut Grove, Minnesota. That's where I went to school, grew up, farm kid. And mom, dad, sister, brother, typical poor family, but we didn't know we were poor because, depression, but everybody had a lot of food because we were farmers. Dad was an entrepreneur. I got my take a little bit of a chance mentality from him. My mom was a negotiator. I went to her if I wanted something, and she went to my dad. And I learned negotiating skills there. I had a brother who served in Korea. All four of my brothers-in-law were World War II guys. One was killed. So those were my heroes, family, and good role models for them.
19-year-old Leo Thorsness enlisted in the Air Force in 1952. Though he enlisted during the Korean War, he would receive his wings and commission when the war was coming to a close. Thorsness would serve for over a decade in a peacetime Air Force until 1966, when Vietnam became his war. He was flying a modified F-105 as part of a group known as the Wild Weasels.
I was a thing called Wild Weasels. Air Force has got to have a code name for everything. Military does. Wild Weasel. Vietnam was the first time there was surface-to-air missiles that could shoot down airplanes. And our job was to find and kill SAM sites, surface-to-air missile sites.
On April 19, 1967, Thorsness was leading 4 planes on a mission over North Vietnam, deep within enemy territory.
It was pretty much of a typical Weasel mission. There'd be 4 airplanes that go in first. I, as the leader, I'd always split my flight of 4 into 2 elements. We'd cover north and south of the target, or east or west, we said. And we try to give them twice as much pleasure, the SAM guys, the guys on the ground shooting at us. And we had destroyed 1 SAM site, we rolled in another one, and my wingman got hit. And I told him to head for the mountains, and we were over the flatland south of Hanoi. To get close enough, maybe in the mountains, you could have a chance of rescue. He got in the foothills, and the airplane quit, and both he and his wingman ejected. I could hear the beepers. I homed in on the beepers. You got an automatic direction finder, so I could find them. And about the time I picked up their chutes, the MiG was rolling in on one of them. So I rolled in on the MiG, and he and I got into it, and I ended up shooting that MiG down.
Because his aircraft was low on fuel, Thorsness was forced to depart the area in search of a tanker. Upon being advised that 2 World War II rescue planes, known as Sandys, were orbiting near the down cruise position, and that there were hostile MiGs in the area posing a serious threat, Thorsness quickly refueled and returned to help.
So we come back in, and I'm headed back towards that shoot-down site, that area. And Sandy 2, which is their call sign, says, Sandy 1's going in, Sandy 1's going in, the MiG's got him, he's going in, he just hit the mountain. And so he said, help, in essence. Not believing it would work, but I said, Sandy 2, you turn that airplane as hard as you can, right on the deck, slow down as slow as you can get, they'll never stay with you. And I'll come into you, I'll run through you, and I'll pick them up. We did that, and somehow the guy survived. And we ran through them, and all the MiGs jumped on me. He got out. A 105 couldn't turn hard for long because it was a heavy airplane with little bitty wings, but it sure could go fast, 800 knots. And we outran these MiGs right on the deck, and it's going supersonic at 20 feet, over the rice fields. That's exciting. It's up. I'm headed out, my backseat and I, Harry and I, are headed for a tanker over Laos, and in about 10 minutes, I get this radio call that you never hear in combat over enemy territory. You always use call signs. Cadillac 1, this is green. He said, Leo. Well, that gets your attention.
When it became apparent that an aircraft in the area was critically low on fuel, and that the crew would have to bail out unless it could reach a tanker, Thorsness, low on fuel himself, gave up his chance to refuel and headed instead toward a forward base.
My backseat and I thought, we weren't sure about when we gave our tanker up, we thought we could make it to Thailand and eject the Mekong River. Laos, bad country, Thailand, good country. And so we climbed to 35,000 feet, and when we hit 70 miles from the river, you could glide 2 miles per 1,000 feet in that old airplane. Pulled it back to idle, indicating 0 fuel, and not only did we make the river, we made Udorn, which is 8 miles past it, and we ran out of fuel as we got to hit the ground. 11 days after I flew that mission, which I finally received the Medal of Honor for, I was shot down. 100 missions was a full tour, and I was shot down on my 93rd mission. So we were so badly hit. We knew we were out of business. I put my helmet against the side of the canopy, had a visor. I couldn't see out. The smoke was so thick. And the stick was just flopped. The rudders were gone. The engine, everything was gone. And we knew instantly we were out. So, and we hadn't been 2 seconds since we were hitting it. So we were ejected about 600 knots. But I looked down, and clearly I could see muzzle flashes, rifles. It's hard to hide in parachute. That's really hard. We were probably a mile apart, Harry and I. We were both captured. This tribal area. These people have never seen electricity, but they've seen it, but they don't have it. We went from absolute high-tech to abject no-tech. I mean, it was just surreal, but it was happening. They got us to the edge of the foothills, and we stayed there that day, and they interrogated Harry and I separately in a pig pen, literally pig pens. And they take you out and beat you, and I was able to stick with my name, rank, still my date of birth, so was Harry. And then that night a truck came, and they took Harry first about dusk and into Hanoi, and 18 days and nights of torture at the Hanoi Hilton. It was a very brutal time, and it was very difficult the first time I broke and went past name rank, because I thought I was the weakest man. It was the worst day of my life. Worse than being shot down is when I broke, because I thought, I bet nobody else did. I had about a year of solitary, which is not untypical. That was pretty routine. But when I got in with the other guys, I found out they too had broken. And then with the TAP code, I found out everybody that survived eventually went past name rank, and that was very comforting. Not that made me strong, but it made them more equal in my eyes. And I found out I wasn't the worst guy. I wasn't the weakest guy. You know, you get into the prison system and you work your way through it. 3 years were brutal, 3 years were boring. It took a lot of adjusting to get used to that routine of not having your freedom, and that's why freedom turned out to be, no doubt, the most precious commodity we have. But with the TAP code, prison TAP code, I got a message, said, Leo, did you know that you had been submitted for the Medal of Honor? And I didn't. And so when I came home, a total of 6 years after the action or so, a little over that, I received a Medal of Honor. I think most feel we're just temporary guardians of the Medal of Honor. We happened to be the guy that was recognized, and it could have been one of many people that did as much or more. They weren't recognized, they were killed, there was nobody who witnessed it. We happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I think we wear it for all veterans. And really, I think we wear it for any American, civilian or military, that does the job they're assigned, no matter what it is, the best they can do it. And they're responsible. I think that's what makes the country.
Lieutenant Colonel Thorsness was shot down in April of 1967. That's a little while after Jeremiah Denton was shot down. And in his podcast, we talk about his confinement in the Hanoi Hilton, the TAP code they developed, and the torture that he received. The North Vietnamese actively tortured American pilots at the Hanoi Hilton from 1966 to about 1969, and then with peace talks going on and with the public relations getting worse for the North Vietnamese, they stopped that and treated them more humanely. About 6 months after Lieutenant Colonel Thorsness was shot down, John McCain was shot down, and they just happened to be housed together at the Hanoi Hilton. Here, Lieutenant Colonel Thorsness talks about his time as a prisoner of the North Vietnamese.
As far as my prison goes, I was there about 6 years, which is about an average amount of time for the old-timers. 350 of us known alive in the system for 6 years. And the 3 years were, first 3 years were brutal, last 3 years were boring. First 3 years you were solitary confinement most of the time, or 2 or 3%. Last 3 years were big cells. First 3 years, any sound they could hear, a whisper or a tap or anything, if they could hear you, they beat you. And the last 3 years, we could talk out loud and so on. So a major difference for a lot of reasons, but that was kind of, the prison was broken down into about those 2-3 year segments. The way, I think I always used about the same system. And something I've always remembered, there's about 4 ways I dealt with the really tough times. When you're being tortured and you're solitary, and they don't really care if you live or not, number one, the will to survive is really strong, really strong. 2 is, I broke time in small little blocks. You didn't have a watch, but if you can count your heart rates, if you can concentrate that much being tortured, it's fast, but you can estimate time. And when I thought I was about had, I would say, Leo, last another minute. Last another 30 seconds. Just like you've heard, everybody's heard people say, going through tough times, I'll take it a day at a time. Their spouse died or whatever. Number 3, we were surrounded with just outstanding people. We all have a few good friends. In Hanoi, it's like we had 350 good friends. Everybody was there. It didn't matter what color you were. It didn't matter what your religion was, what service you were in. There were people, a person took torture from me. He thought I wasn't going to survive, make another day. And he went out of his way to just be really obnoxious. And they jumped on him and left me alone. And that's brotherly love. And then also I'm a Christian. And I don't mean to say that last or put it last, but I think we're supposed to do the best we can for ourselves. And but there were prayers answered there. I saw a couple of miracles there. So getting through tough times took a while to learn that, but it came natural.
Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps. Colonel Thorsness, our gratitude is unlimited. We cannot begin to repay you for your service and what you did for our country.
It's hard for me to convey how important freedom is. And I didn't appreciate it, and I don't know that anyone can until they've lost it. It doesn't happen automatically. It's got to be re-earned by every generation, or at least every other generation. If you let it slip very long, it's gone.